Hey everyone, how are you? Welcome to this week's episode of our podcast. It's called Is Breakfast Included? Thanks for stopping by. Before I get started, I want to let everyone know that this week, Friday, March 7th, year of our Lord 2025, marks the first episode of the 5th season of our podcast. Can you believe it? I bet you can. I bet when we did that first episode, you're like, I can't wait till that first episode of the 5th season. Yeah. Anyway, to kick it off, Lisa and I wanted to do something special for you guys. And what could be more special than checking in with a very attractive and talented gentleman who we haven't heard much from since he and his amazing band completed their historic residency at the Las Vegas Sphere. 40 shows ended a year ago this week. That's right. I am talking about my sometimes boss, Adam Clayton, who plays bass for you two. Adam was kind enough to take time and sit down and answer all of our questions. And we wanted to know everything. We threw him some real hardball questions, and he was just like, give me all you got. Give me all you got. Yeah, you got to listen to him say that. We talked to him about his new docuseries, Ballroom Blitz, about Irish show bands. You can't watch it in the US just yet, but it will be released eventually after they clear up some copyright stuff. He talked about U2 being back in the studio, and he let us know what he likes for breakfast. Have you ever been driving your car and thought, I wonder what Adam Clayton eats for breakfast? Well, he told us. But you got to listen to check it out. Anyway, grab that cup of coffee, settle in, and let's check it out. All right. Well, I really don't need to introduce you, but for those two people that are going to watch who don't know who you are, tell everyone who you are.
Me, I am an old man who has spent the last 50 years playing bass in U2. And it's been a wonderful ride. And I never thought I would still be doing it at this time in my life. So I'm extremely grateful, and I can't believe the life I'm living.
Wow, that's awesome, man. You sound very grateful for someone, for someone from such an iconic band.
Well, it didn't start out iconic. We were a bunch of, when we first started rehearsing together, we were 16. And by the time we were 18, we managed to get a single out. And, we weren't thinking too far ahead. We thought, a few singles, maybe we'll get an album. And then who knows? It was at the height of punk, and anybody was able to get a single out, but very few people were able to turn it into a career. So we'd have been happy with 3 albums probably, but it's great to still be in the game.
Yeah. And in the game in a major way. I of course met you. Well, I met you before briefly in Dublin on the side of the stage, but then I met you last year when I came to work with you. And my impression of you guys as a unit is I couldn't believe how much work you guys still put into it for a band on your level. Like I think that's what blew me away more than anything. The amount of rehearsals, work, because sometimes a band not even on that level puts in a fraction of the time that you guys put in.
Well, I think we've never forgotten how on a very fundamental level it's been hard for us. It's we were the worst band starting out, and we just kind of clawed our way up, and we learned along the way that being prepared is your best defense against failure.
That's true.
So, there's a lot of hanging about, and you can either use that hanging about to kind of do some playing, and we all ended up doing this because we loved the music, we loved the playing, and I have to say I like rehearsal because it's kind of private time. It's private time where it's the 4 members of the band doing what we have always done, which is like working on a tune and trying to make it sound as best it can. And it's not just about making it sound the best it can, but trying to create something that people are interested in, something that has a connectivity to an audience. Because if we're just trying to make it the best we can so we can play it to ourselves and slap ourselves on the back, that's not why we do it. We kind of know that, you know, U2 can't be U2 without all the members of the band, and we can't be U2 without the audience there to kind of testify that we're there and we're doing it.
Yeah. Just before the call, you and I, or the three of us, were talking about your relationship with California and this recent concert that just happened. When you guys filmed Streets on the rooftop of that building, like, I still see you as that guy.
Hopefully a few girls do as well.
Did you know that's where the change was going to happen? I mean, literally, that album, you know, took you to places that, did you know where it was going to take you?
You know, we knew it was the jumping off point, but we didn't know what would be coming with it, you know. And of course, along with a lot of good stuff, there was some bad stuff as well. And I mean that in an affectionate way, in that, you know, all you ever want to do when you set out on this journey is you want to have, you know, hit records. Number one is a magical number. There's only one number one. And, you know, you don't realize how that is going to create a convulsion in your life, because along with being number one comes a whole other bunch of issues that you have to deal with. And I think it's, in some ways, that's the measure of a talent, is how they deal with the success. You know, everybody gets a chance at success one way or another. And if you can harness that success and make it work for you and rise above it, then you've a chance. But sometimes it can pull you down as much as it can lift you up. Amazing. But I did like that Streets video. Looking back on it, it kind of it sort of captured a casual elegance that we had at that point, which was, we didn't know what was going to happen. We just turned up on that roof and we were going to play our song no matter what.
Yeah. I love that video, by the way. And like I said, even when I came to work for you, I was like, where is he? You're standing right in front of me.
How do you know when a song is finished? When you guys are rehearsing and you're jamming and you're writing, and then how do you know when it's done?
I think for me anyway, I get to a point where I feel like all the, not the loose ends, but all the emotional ends are resolved in some way. You know, it's always difficult to assess whether a lyric is going to be universally understood, because lyrics mean different things to different people. So I like to evaluate whether the lyric is true to the emotional performance of it. You know, if the melody and the performance of that melody offers some insight to those words, and that you can hang on to them in a certain way. And then the music has to have, for me, a kind of visceral quality. I mean, you know, there's a lot of chord sequences are repeated over the years, so they become familiar and you can recognize them. But I always want to feel that the band is expressing something different in the sonics and the way those songs are put together, and it has to have a uniqueness. If I feel like it's something that U2 has done before, I always think, we have to push it a bit further. We have to go a little further to get there. And at the end of the day, it also has to keep my attention. I know that's kind of obvious in a way, but sometimes, you know, a song that doesn't keep your attention, it may be a great song, but you know, it's not one that you can really stand behind.
Yeah. Well, actually,
sorry, one other addition is the other the other clue that a song is finished is when you have exhausted every other possibility.
Okay.
And you're just worn out and you're on the floor.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us? Oh, okay.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about Ballroom Blitz? We were just looking about the Irish show bands, and we were wondering if you had any personal connections to that, or how you got into that.
You know, it's an odd thing, but for years, this history of show band culture in Ireland has been kind of it's been almost criminalized. You know, if you were a musician in a show band, you know, you couldn't possibly have had any talent, and you were ripping people off, and there was no merit to it. And I've always sort of felt slightly bad about that, because as a musician, if I'm really, really honest, one of the things that excited me about being able to pick up a guitar and play was that I could play somebody else's song, because I knew if I played somebody else's song, if it was a good song, you know, people would gather around and be interested in me. So the idea that musicians playing other people's songs is a bad thing just didn't jive well with me. So a friend, so when I was coming up, when I was, you know, 13, 14, 15, 16, these show bands were very big in Ireland, and they were bands that essentially did the top 40 songs, and they would turn up and they would do dances, and it was a big thing in Ireland. There were a lot of bands, you know, maybe 500, maybe 600 at the height of it, and they were traveling all over the country, and they were doing gigs, you know, pretty much 6 nights a week. They did a Tuesday through to a Sunday, and Monday night was off. And these were young guys that, in terms of the Irish economy at that time, the only other kind of jobs would have been working on farms or working in factories. So these were guys whose spirit I understood. They had some musical talent, and they were getting out of, you know, what was predetermined to be the life that they should have. And they were playing cover versions, and they had to learn these songs very quickly. They had to really deliver them. And in those days, in the 60s and the 70s in Ireland, we didn't have international television channels. So nobody really knew what the stars looked like. There wasn't, you know, there weren't videos back then. There wasn't live TV featuring American entertainers or UK entertainers. So these guys really became the first music stars. People related to them as, because they were playing hit songs, but they related to them as these guys that had these hit songs and good wardrobes. So that was what took me back into it. And then my friend said, I want to do a documentary on the history of these bands, and I want to take it up to a terrorist incident where one of the best bands in the country was set upon by terrorists on the border, and 4 of them were killed. They were shot, and their van was blown up and everything. So it was like this, you know, you had this sort of idealized story of music in Ireland, and then you had this very much this hard ending to that era. And after that era, because that was in 1975, after that era came the new breed of bands, and a lot of times they were northern punk bands as much as they were southern punk bands, and they were bands that were about breaking down the religious and the sectarian divide. So that's quite a long answer to what we were doing, but I realized as I went back into these bands and listened to their tunes, they were releasing singles of you know, American songs or whatever, and they were really, really good versions. I mean, these guys really could play, and they could really deliver with very basic technology. And it's always a testament to a player if, you know, you can produce the sounds of different musicians just while you're standing on stage, song by song. and I don't know what techniques they use, but they would have, very much known how to change the tone on the guitars and what have you. But they wouldn't have had much equipment to do it with.
Yeah, yeah. We've watched a little bit of it, pieces of it, but one of my favorite stories in there is Brendan O'Brien's, when he could do the Buddy Holly cough, that he thought everyone could do it. And it became his thing, Uh, so like you said, they were doing cover versions of the music they heard from, I believe, the Armed Forces Network.
Yeah, they had, the access to pop music in Ireland at the time was very, very limited because the national radio didn't play pop music. So there was some pirate radio stations based off the coast of Europe that would transmit into Ireland. So people would listen to those. And then there was Armed Forces Radio, which was mainly American music that they would listen to. And so again, the general public didn't really have access to these songs. So when they were played, obviously if they were hit songs, they communicated. But it's interesting that these guys are now, they're all getting to a point where they're old and frail and they're beginning to die. And it just seemed like the right time to tell their story. And in fact, even since that show ran in December, two people have died who were in the show who I interviewed. And also what's nice about them is rather like in America, where your early music business came out of a jazz idiom. It was jazz players that converted to rock and roll. That was very much the story with these show bands. They started out in the 50s as big jazz bands, and then economically they reduced themselves to a 6 or an 8 piece band that could fit in a van, and then they were able to go around the country.
How do you think that the show band era has shaped the contemporary Irish music scene?
Well, one way it shaped us is, I think, fundamentally, Irish people like to go out and have a good time.
Sure.
they like to dance. They like to gather around music, and it's at the core of how we communicate. And I guess the show bands, they kind of carried that tradition through. And at the same time, there was an embryonic traditional music scene and folk music scene that also, involved dancing, because Irish traditional music is a form of dance music. And then from that, we've now got, a lot of very serious kind of rock bands and pop groups, probably more for the size of the country than maybe anywhere else. And they're of a very, very good quality. And of course, everybody looks to America, I think, rather than to the UK. If you're in Ireland, you're kind of American facing. But I guess, going back to your question, I guess we fundamentally realize that you have to put on a show. And I think that's what your bands did as well, particularly the African American bands, the Little Richards, the Chuck Berrys, James Brown. It was about a show, and the clue is it's in the name of the band. It's a show band.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
In the while filming it, once you started filming and doing the interviews, were these artists, were they all receptive, or were any of them like,
Well, I think a lot of them have had a bad time in the media. A lot of people feel like they've been dissed. So at first, they were a little wary of me coming around. Who's this kind of rock and roll guy? Is he coming around to sneer at us and humiliate us? And I just tried very hard to be respectful and say, there is a legacy here, and your legacy produced an industry that my band benefited from. Without those guys kind of supporting music shops and instrument shops and employing people and creating an industry, albeit be it at a basic level, there would have been no talent for us to learn from when we came along. So that's a very serious debt, and one that I took very seriously when I met these people. There was some basic recording studios that existed because of them, and we certainly did our demos in recording studios that wouldn't have existed without those show bands.
So that's cool. That's kind of how my next question is. How do you feel about new artists citing U2 as an influence?
Well, it's always nice when somebody says they were touched by your music, and when the result of being touched by your music is inspiring them to go and do something of themselves. I am. We live in a world where creativity is becoming less and less valued, but I'm a kind of person that I love creativity. I mean, I love somebody, fucking with something. I love people making something do something that it shouldn't do. Cool. And that's what makes me happy. So anybody that, can be inspired to pick up a guitar and write a better song than U2's written, or make a better tune, or whatever. I think that's a good result for me.
Cool. Very
cool. I learned in the just to touch on the documentary, I had no idea Rory Gallagher came from the big band era. Being a huge fan of Rory, was there anything you learned that you didn't know about? Like, was there anything that just made you go like, "Whoa, I didn't know that," once you were doing the interviews and the research and whatnot?
Another guy, and I don't know how well known he'd be in America, but I interviewed him in the show. A guy called Paul Brady, a songwriter, mainly known as a folk performer, actually, but he'd written some big songs that I think Tina Turner covered one of them, and that sort of got him out there. But I didn't realize that he had started out before he kind of went back into folk. He'd started out in a blues band that had a hit and was writing its own original material at the time when these show bands were happening, and that they, had the kind of success that could have spawned an international career. So that was something new to learn, because that was a real sign of creativity. And then the other thing that really blew my mind was there's a character called Phil Coulter from Northern Ireland, and I didn't realize he had written so many big songs for pop artists there's a Cliff Richard song called Congratulations, which is like a big cheesy hit, but he'd written that was a big song. And another song called Puppet on a String, which won the Eurovision Song Contest for a singer called Sandy Shaw. So there were all these kind of connections of real mainstream kind of songwriting and celebration, which was just great to uncover again. And the other thing was, when the American bands came in, these guys actually were able to hang with them. Like, there was talk, one of the guys was talking about when Taj Mahal came and they all kind of hung out together. And you kind of go, yeah, they were definitely proper musicians, and they were respected.
Yeah. Other than making documentaries, U2, what else does Adam Clayton like to do when he's not performing?
Well, I mean, some of those things are becoming documented. I've always had an interest in the visual arts, and I'm lucky enough that because of my sort of success, I'm able to meet artists, I'm able to visit them in their studios, and I'm able to go to art galleries. And for me, identifying creative talent, it's something that I can do. I don't know. It's from listening to records and going, that's a good record, that's a good band. You get good at it. So in visual arts, I get good at it. And for me, any type of creativity, whether it's visual arts or music, I find that when the artist is really struggling to find their voice, as a visual artist, as a painter, or as a performer, you see that struggle, and that struggle produces the uniqueness. And sometimes after an artist has found their niche, that's when they kick back and they take it easy, and it's not as vital as that moment, that burst of energy when they find it. So I'm very sensitive to that, and that's what I like to find. The other thing that I've been noted for is I like gardening. Now, when I say that, I don't mean I kind of dig the earth, but again, I'm very lucky. I bought the house that we recorded the Joshua Tree in 1988, and the house was set in 17 acres of land, and it was very overgrown and very run down and everything. And I've been able over the years to make changes and plant trees, and because it was such a long time ago, those trees are now quite big trees. So, and I'm sort of, I try to be as generous as I can with it, and at certain times of the year, we'll host various groups of people that have some kind of interest in horticulture. If they apply as part of a group, they can come and visit, and it's strictly if you're interested in plants. If you're interested in music, it doesn't count.
So you don't want someone showing up there with a stack of records.
No, exactly. No. So it's preferably people walking very slowly in big baggy coats. That's what we're looking for.
What something you said that you look for creativity in visual arts. Have you ever heard a song or saw a piece of art by an unknown artist or creator and reached out to them yourself saying, hey, I really like this, and maybe mentored them?
It's really hard in the music world to do that, because there's so many things that can change or affect whether somebody has a career. But I'm always hearing things where I think, oh, they're doing something interesting, and if they don't receive recognition from that, maybe there's something I can learn from that. And I think in our world, Bernie, the way people have changed their bass sound, people are using a lot more overdrive on bass sounds and stuff. So I tune into those kind of changes that are happening in our industry. In the visual arts, again, I don't feel like I have a right to be a kingmaker. If I see something that I think is worth mentoring, I'll just hang around it a bit and hope that I'll get a greater insight. But I think I have to be so careful of sort of making promises to people where they think it can make a real difference. But I just like the conversation sometimes. That's really what I like. I like to be able to hang. I like to be at the back of the room, and I like to see other people do well.
Yeah, that's a very responsible answer, very responsible way of looking at it. But speaking of, you brought up bass tones. you play a series of different basses live. Is there one bass, other than, of course, the famous P bass, that you can't do a show without?
Recently, yeah, and you would be familiar with the Warwicks that I've been playing. I'm really like those. I feel they're a very modern bass. The P is a classic. You can't mess with that. But the Warwicks are great for that kind of growly rock and roll sound. I mean, the other thing, and this is disappointing to people wanting some great insight, is I really find every time I pick up the Fender jazz bass that I find it'll do things that I never knew it could do. So there's there's a great range of sound on that. Just to go a bit nerdy on you, I've been doing some recording with the band, and I've been playing that Gibson Les Paul, is it the Legacy, the gold one? I've been playing that a lot more in the recording, and I'm really liking that. And then I found I had a mid-70s Music Man Stingray bass that I kind of bought years ago, and I couldn't really play it, and now I feel like I can play it. The only problem is it's too heavy. I can't wear it and play it. I have to play it sitting down.
I was going to say that's a boat anchor.
Yeah, you can't walk around with that thing on you.
No,
but in a studio, it sounds really good. So I think that's going to turn up on the other recordings that we're doing.
Cool. Has technology changed the way you guys create music now, and how?
I think, the huge change is you no longer need to go into recording studios. You can do it anywhere. And in some ways, that doesn't make for great sounding records in the old tradition, but it does make for very good quality demoing, because you can be doing something on a laptop kind of quickly and you capture an idea and it's there. Whereas I think in the old days, I mean, we all came from an era where you might have a cassette player that you would just record something on, and that was your reference. It's a lot more different now.
And then you play that cassette player into another cassette player, and you overdub something.
Yeah, exactly.
The good old days.
Yeah, with added hiss. Yeah.
Is there anything? Of course, this question we're going to ask. Is there anything we can expect from you or the band anytime soon? You just said you were recording.
Yeah, we're gonna get back in there in a few weeks' time, and we're gonna work up to the summer. And once we've kind of got our stuff in order, we will then look at it and say, okay, we're going to go for a release date in early next year. But I'm not saying there's a release date early next year, because we're not at that position. But
that'll be the thumbnail.
Yeah, if we can do that, that's what we want to do. That's our ambition.
Yeah.
Do you have any like personal rituals or anything that you do before you go on stage to get yourself hyped up, or to?
No. I mean, I suppose there's an hour. Well, actually, I suppose there is something. I mean, there's an hour or so in wardrobe that is just preparation and getting into the moment. But I also do about 45 minutes of physio before I go into wardrobe. And, I work out most days, and I find that if I get the physio, then I'm in better shape, at the end of the day, in the evening, when you're going on stage, you're kind of loose. Whereas if you just work out and you don't do any physio, you get tight. You're tight during the day. So that would be my ritual. The in a funny way, the ritual for me is much more what happens when I come off stage, because that's the challenge, is how do you kind of come back down?
Mm.
How do you make sure you can sleep and not, stay up watching CNN?
Totally. Just stressing.
Oh no, we don't.
Yeah, you got to avoid that CNN habit. It used to be a lot more expensive, but now it's CNN.
Yeah. Now it's just stressful.
Yeah,
watching it.
Yeah, exactly.
If you all those years ago, if you weren't a musician, was there anything you wanted to do in particular?
I think I would have, definitely gravitated towards the arts, because I'm kind of a lazy-ish sort of a person. I think I'd probably have picked up a camera and tried to convince people I was a photographer.
Cool.
Yeah, I think, I think I would just have liked that world. And, you two, we were on a kind of trajectory to Mars from, our third or fourth album on. I mean, after we'd put out the War album, it was obvious we were going to keep going, that was not the end of the career. It was kind of liftoff. I think if we'd been at one of those bands that had short careers and did 3 albums and then disappeared, then I would have been, I'd have been goofing around until my 30s, and then I'd have gone, okay, I've got to make something of myself, and I'd have gone into having a camera. Maybe I'd have shot album sleeves. I don't know.
Yeah.
Has your perspective on the music industry evolved over the years? It's not a setup.
I guess it has, in a way, which is that I have mucho respect for those early pioneers, those people that started out in the music business. And when I'm a product of the 70s in a way, and I didn't realize the quality of musicianship and songwriting that existed, in the 60s, and even in the 70s. I really didn't appreciate the talent that was around. I wonder if at the other end, which is, in contemporary music now, it's too early to say whether the talent is equivalent or if it's going anywhere. But I suppose in my darkest days, I might say that AI ultimately will do away with creative talent, because it'll be able to conjure up things on command. And in some ways, what I like about creativity is it's about the things that you don't expect to work together. And I don't know if AI can do that.
Sure.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the mid 2000s when Gibson developed the self-tuning guitar.
Yeah,
Do you remember
yeah,
that? And I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
my artist at the time turned to me and he said, "Pretty soon you're going to be out of the job." And I said, "Well, you're not going to have any. You're always going to need someone to blame, so I'll be here." And he said, "Yeah, you're right."
That is true wisdom.
I want to ask you something, and it pertains to you too. You guys, we talked about California. You guys have always had a special relationship with Vegas as well. You film videos there, and you did this iconic residency, this iconic series of concerts. Do you ever plan on doing something like that again?
I think we did always have a thing about Vegas, and I guess it probably went back to, the mythology of the Rat Pack and Sinatra, because for our generation, even though as kids it was our parents' music, it still had something. And curiously enough, this Ballroom Blitz, that documentary that I was involved in filming, one of the guys that was very instrumental in getting Irish bands to play in Vegas, because these Irish show bands did play in Vegas, was a guy called Bill Fuller, who was an Irishman from Kerry, and he owned a load of ballrooms across America, across the UK, and across Europe. And in fact, one of his ballrooms was the Fillmore West, and he ended up living in Vegas, and he I suppose he captured that dream that you could come from Ireland and you could end up in the entertainment capital of the world. And as Irish guys, I guess that's something we can kind of relate to. That's like, although it's, playing Vegas doesn't mean that you've really arrived. I think Vegas is a great town for musicians and talent. People put a lot of money into their shows. There's a lot of good quality shows in Vegas, and if nothing else, the gambling side of Vegas, it has its darkness, but the fact that there's great work for musicians and people are getting paid well is, I'll vote for that.
Yeah, I agree.
I have kind of a gushy fan question, but you've just been great at style, like for as long as I've ever been aware of who you are. And I was just curious. This is just nosy, my own personal nosiness. Do you shop for your own clothes? Do you have a stylist? Do you have someone who dresses you? Do designers just send you clothes and you select from that? Like, how do you get dressed in the morning? Like,
it's a combination. When we're working and it's photo shoots or shows, it's important that there's somebody that knows how everybody is going to present and make sure that it comes together, so you don't all turn up wearing red that day or whatever. So I get help and we get help in that way. But on downtime, I really like shopping. I mean, I like to go to the shops. I like to see what's in the shops. I like to see where the line has changed or where the fabric has changed. At this stage, I kind of know what works with me. And in some ways, you just spend your whole life, buying the same thing over and over again, just in a different color or whatever.
That's true.
But it's recreation for me. And again, it sort of allows my head to go somewhere else. Yeah. I mean, it's sadly, I think in this economic downturn, there aren't that many really good cutting edge designs. I think what's happening now is a lot of fashion is just reproducing itself. And you find that there's a recycling going on and people aren't taking risks. I thought, fashion was very interesting kind of in the 90s, the Alexander McQueen era. And in fact, Yves Saint Laurent around that time was really good as well. Prada was great. But now it's a little bit like everybody's copying each other. And I appreciate that it's really, really hard for them to stay in business and they have to be that competitive.
Well, you do it well. Your style.
Thank you.
Okay.
We did an episode about a year ago, and 15 minutes of it was spent talking about your fashion and your style. Wow. By me.
That is actually true.
By me. I was like, this guy knows how to dress.
Well, I guess I never really wanted to look like anyone else. Some people are kind of just shaped that way. I guess that was, I'm a quiet, shy person, but I also have this other job as being a performer. And part of that means you kind of have to be noticed. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah. Well, Adam, we know you're busy and we appreciate you taking the time to do this for us. This is very special for us. our podcast, it is called Is Breakfast Included? And if we were having breakfast, what would you have?
I'm very minimalist these days. I tend to just have 2 boiled eggs for about 4.5 minutes. So the yolk is a little runny, but the white is quite hard, and that's it. A lot of espressos.
Okay.
Usually, I have a cutoff after 6, but by then I'm kind of just where I want to be.
Right on. And but before we let you go, where can people find out about Ballroom Blitz? Where can they watch it? When will it be released here in the U.S.?
Well, there's I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that the show that went out in Ireland is an Ireland-only transmission, and that's because of the way the licensing arrangements are for the music. So it's only licensed for release in Ireland. We are at the moment, we're going to recut it into a shorter version, and that's going to be licensed for international. And when that goes out, I don't know who we're going to sell it to or where it's going to end up, but it will have an international release and it will be available.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it's always great to see you, and it's always going to be a highlight that I've got to spend so much time with you. So.
Well, thank you guys for doing this, because I know it's hard to do these shows, to keep coming up with ideas and getting people to come on them. And I know it takes energy and dedication. So thank you.
No, well, this is going to be our first episode of our 5th season. You're going to kick off our 5th season.
Wow.
So it'll be very special.
All right. Well, Lisa, nice meeting you.
It was great meeting you. Thank you so much for doing this.
And thank you for your thoughtful questions. And Bernie, thank you for 6 months service, I guess, out there in the desert.
Yeah. Well, I hope to cross paths with you again, buddy.
Yeah, we'll see you again soon.
All right.
Have a great weekend.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right on. Adam Clayton. Great guy, huh? We really appreciate Adam taking the time to do this. That guy is super busy, so it meant a lot to us. You can check out what Adam and the rest of the guys are doing at u2.com. Make sure you keep an eye out for Ballroom Blitz. Once it's released here in the States, it's a great docuseries. While you're online, check out isbreakfast.com. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram from there. Check out our YouTube page. Make sure to subscribe. And while you're there, pick up a shirt. Guys, we want to send a special thanks out to Sebastian Clayton for helping us out with this. He's a good friend of the show, and we really appreciate his support. All right, guys, I am done. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week.